A swing and a miss. Where did WWE go wrong with Cesaro? It's a story that is very straightforward. A tall, handsome, talented as heck wrestler forged on the European wrestling scene, seasoned in places like Ring of Honor, CZW, Chikara, and Pro Wrestling Guerrilla, lands in WWE to rise to greater heights. That is a very straightforward story, but like most of these stories, it goes curvy-wurvy very quickly. Now, it started all right with Cesaro, didn't it? When he landed in WWE, he became the United States champion in pretty quick order, held that belt for 239 days, and it would have surely been the time when he lost that belt to elevate him up. He was having banger matches week to week. He was getting a lot of love from fans and from critics, but instead of being elevated following dominance of the division, he kind of went into this weird halfway house between NXT and the main roster. He was having some quality outings with the likes of Sami Zayn in NXT, and then sort of short burst matches mixed with wins and losses on Monday Night Raw and at live events. I'm going quite deep into this particular story because this is an incredible example of how the rest of the decade plus of Claudio Castagnoli's time in WWE would play out. There is a fierce reluctance throughout this tale of WWE refusing to let Cesaro run with the ball. The closest he came was when he burst one that time at SummerSlam, but that's another story for another time. All these tales that you're going to hear of Cesaro they show him off as a cannot miss prospect. Away from doing single stuff, he was put into tag teams that seemed to be plucked out of nowhere, but him, along with the parties involved, just made magic. Him, Jack Swagger, and Zeb Coulter forming the Real Americans, and they had some crackers. He and Tyson Kidd forming a tag team that changed the shape of the tag division for the WWE for a while. Look up some of the matches that they and the New Day had in the sort of early to mid-teens. You'll check those out there. He and Sheamus quite literally raising the bar in a tag team that was born out of a rivalry, peculiarly enough. And, of course, the short-term run that he had with Shinsuke Nakamura. They even won tag belts, and they even won a claim for what they did as well. Cesaro is a guy that was managed by Zeb Coulter. He was managed by Paul Heyman at the height of Brock Lesnar breaking The Undertaker's winning streak at WrestleMania. All of these elements, and sometimes they were gifts. Sometimes it was Cesaro turning chicken you-know-what into Supreme de Volée. However, he never seemed to swing any further up. It was either swing across or swing down. Despite these key moments, there was a reluctance from WWE, as I said earlier, a fierce reluctance to stop him from moving up. And some of these moments, you think, how could you have not? Why would you have not? No, I'm talking about the night he won the Andre the Giant Memorial Battle Royal at WrestleMania 30. You watch that pop as he hoists Big Show over the top. The night after, when he teams up with Paul Heyman, how does that become a losing streak almost for Cesaro? And it would become that. How does that not elevate as opposed to anything else? It blows the mind. And when The Bar, for example, became the top tag team in WWE by a clear mile, miles and miles, why were they rewarded by being drafted apart and split up while Sheamus was injured? Then why, when it looked as if Cesaro was making that same magic with Shinsuke Nakamura, when that was starting to build, they were just quietly split up when Shinsuke Nakamura became a babyface? Didn't even get a blow-off feud. They just kind of split up. It felt a little different in 2021, didn't it? Felt a little different. We had he and Roman Reigns fighting in the Thunderdome, and we had a WrestleMania moment featuring Seth Rollins, one that again saw so much love for Cesaro on the biggest stage. This time, said our hearts, this time is different. we tried to convince our heads, and sadly our heads were right on this one as well, because we find ourselves, after these stunning WrestleMania performances, seeing Cesaro just quickly drop away and away and away and away. And here we are now with Cesaro no longer part of WWE. No matter what he did, it didn't seem like anything was ever going to come of it. And I think despite all of this, if we're really honest with ourselves, us in the Cesaro section, if we're truly honest with ourselves, the card for Cesaro was well and truly marked in 2014. It was just before Christmas, and it was an episode of Steve Austin's Broken Skull Sessions on the WWE Network, when Steve Austin interviewed Vince McMahon. A very frank, open, honest conversation about the locker room of that day and how it was different to the locker room of the Attitude Era, and how people just didn't want it anymore, and how there was a millennial thing, according to Vince McMahon. And Steve Austin cited Cesaro as a guy who, like many in the locker room, like Mick Foley, who got down on his knees and begged for something to be done with, so many were getting behind Cesaro, and Steve Austin became the mouthpiece for this growing Cesaro section when he named Cesaro whilst talking to Vince McMahon, saying, what about this guy? He's got all the tools, he's got everything. Vince McMahon disagreed, and it was in that moment where, as we say, his card was pretty much marked. Vince McMahon saying that Cesaro lacked charisma. He lacked the verbal skills. He lacked the it factor to connect with the audience. Maybe because he's Swiss, said Vince McMahon. Famous world citizen Vince McMahon. Vince was hopeful that Cesaro could find it, but didn't believe he had it, despite the reactions that he was getting. And I think this interview, whilst it did help with a groundswell for Cesaro, I think it just sort of made Vince double down on his decision almost. Vince McMahon knows what we want in wrestling, of course, better than we do. So who are we to doubt Vince McMahon and what we want? And now Vince McMahon's opinion, as we've found out over the last couple of hours, has changed slightly on Cesaro since 2014. Only slightly. He went from a guy who didn't have the charisma, the verbal skills, or the it factor to a good hand, but was never, ever in consideration at any point by Vince McMahon to be anything more than a player in the lower card. Vince McMahon had no desire, no intention to make Cesaro any more than that. No plans to make him a main eventer, no plans to raise him up the card. So you kind of get why Cesaro would want to step away, despite being offered contracts to stick around. No, there's no question why he would want to go. The Cesaro story is a really, really rough one, because it's a guy who was constantly given like chances and opportunities and almost thrown bones to keep them busy. And then they would just thrive in those opportunities. So when it came to them to go, look, okay, I did that. I did what you told me to do. Now what? Nothing would happen. It was almost like for the audacity, for reaching for the stars, you'd be pulled back down again. And he's a really good example of that. The last time a contract negotiation was up for Cesaro, he ended up, because he hadn't signed, he ended up being pulled from a main match on SmackDown and pulled away from storylines based around SmackDown because he hadn't signed a contract. When he signed a contract, he was rewarded with very little to do on SmackDown. And the same thing was happening again. He hasn't won a match since November because WWE hadn't nailed down a deal for him. Do you blame Cesaro for going, oh really? So despite the last decade or so, if I sign this new contract, you're gonna treat me any differently to how you treated me before? I'm good. Thanks very much. I won't keep you much longer. But we are here to ask the question about where did WWE go wrong with Cesaro? And the real answer to that is WWE as a whole kind of didn't, because they gave opportunity. They created chances for Cesaro to shine, and he did. I don't want you for a second to think that he didn't. He absolutely did. Whatever he was given, he rocked with it and he rolled with it. But it was always going to be for nothing. It was forever going to be for nothing. In a weird way, WWE went wrong with Cesaro by hiring him in the first place. if they had no intention on truly capitalizing on how great he is in the ring, how great a force he is as a wrestler, then you've just spent the last 10 years sort of tantalizing him, you know? After a while, when you realize every time you reach for the brass ring, Vince McMahon's just gonna lift it up a little further, you're gonna wanna go somewhere else, aren't you? So I think WWE as a whole, he certainly had friends within the company that gave him chances, gave him opportunity, and really wanted the best for him. But the guy at the top of the tree just didn't see it, and that is where the issue really comes from. Vince McMahon did Cesaro a great disservice in a weird way. This sounds like quite a loaded statement that will probably be read back to me. Vince McMahon did a great disservice for Cesaro by hiring him in the first place. I'm glad that Cesaro made lots and lots of money. I hope he makes lots and lots more. But, you know, there was never any intention to make him any more than what he was. Maybe because he's Swiss. Vince McMahon 2014. Whatever happens from here, I have every confidence that Claudio Castagnoli, wherever he chooses to lay his hat next, he will very much prove what it is all about. And I look forward to seeing another company give him the chance to run with the ball. As long as it's not a beach ball. He hates them. He hates them. Stay safe. Love you, bye.